good, my crew? Hope you guys are doing well today. At last, I am finally diving into the Virginia lore.
Thank you!
Yep, it's time for us to take ourselves up to Roanoke, Virginia. For those of you who are not aware, I was fortunately very blessed to be accepted to be a mechanical engineering intern for Norfolk Southern in the summer of 2024.
Incredible.
And although I am nearest to Inman Yard, Norfolk Southern elected to put me up in Roanoke, Virginia. And with this area being one that was completely unknown to me, this assignment gave me a lot of excitement in terms of places I could explore, but there was responsibility in there, mainly finding a place to stay. Residence is not for the free, no. So on my 2024 spring break, I made the 6-hour drive with the fam up from my stay in Georgia to the city of Roanoke in order to familiarize myself with the area and in order to explore housing options for my eventual start date 2 months from this time. And at last, after driving nearly a quarter of a day, we are now in the beautiful city of Roanoke, Virginia, coming off the interstate to explore the area and to see if I could find where I would be working. And Roanoke would not disappoint with the train activity either, because immediately upon arriving, we happened to find this train parked next to these shops. Now, I had assumed, just based on the fact that I found a Norfolk Southern train parked here and there was a giant Norfolk and Western logo on the top, that this would be the location of my work for the summer. But I would actually be wrong. The building before us is known as the East End Shops, which, as you could guess, belonged to the Norfolk and Western Railway, which has a very strong presence in this area, who was eventually succeeded by Norfolk Southern, which, despite making some rather lengthy investments into this building, actually sold it off in 2020 and leased it out to Genesis Rail Services, which was the company that was actively using this property while I was up here. As for where I was actually going to be working this summer, well, we'll get there when we get there. For now, I'm on business. I wasn't up here for filming primarily. I was up here to find a place to live and to also see some family. After plenty of hours of trying to find some location that would be feasible for both transportation and for costs, I found myself back in downtown and getting to at least get a little bit of filming while I'm up here. As I mentioned before, this is my first time being in this area, so I legit knew nothing about what ran and where all these different lines went to that converged in Roanoke. All I knew is that there was definitely going to be something running somewhere. After crossing one of the many tracks in downtown Roanoke, I would very quickly find a clear aspect for something coming from somewhere, and in literally less than 5 minutes, be surprised to see the railroad gates behind me activated. I didn't know this at the time, and it may not be apparent to you watching this, but this train is actually incredibly rare for me for 2 reasons.
What do you mean by that?
One is the line that it is running on. For those of you who are not familiar with the railscape of Roanoke, there are 2 big yards that Norfolk Southern operates in, and there are 6 different districts that all converge in this city, some of which are connected by a Y on the east side of town. And it is at this Y that we are catching this train right now, and the line that this train is heading on is the Winston-Salem District, ex-Norfolk and Western Railway trackage that runs in between Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and Roanoke, Virginia. And this train in particular is 18W, which originates from Bellevue, Ohio, and terminates at Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And now that we've defined what this train is and the line it's running on, I'm going to tell you why this train is so rare. One is that lead unit. You see how this is a non-Norfolk Southern unit leading this train?
Yes.
My squad, I am being so serious. The entire time I was working in Roanoke, Virginia, from the 3rd week of May to the last week of July, I did not film a single foreign power unit moving on a Norfolk Southern train. I'm being so serious. I'm not saying I didn't see foreign power, but even if I did, it was very sparing. This area does not have foreign power in its sight. And it just so happened that on the one weekend that I happened to come up here to be looking for housing, I found this random train with BNSF leading. speaking of the Winston-Salem district, here's the second thing why this train is so rare. This line is dead. And when I say dead, I mean dead. No joke, my squad, there are only 2 mainline trains that run this line every day. 18W, that we are looking at right now, and its counterpart, 19W, which is now known as 11E. Any other traffic that you may happen to see here will be a local that is definitely not running this full line, or if you're fortunate, you happen to find an as-needed bulk train such as coal or grain that will take this line and carry loads to and from North Carolina. So, long story short, this is a poverty line, and by sheer coincidence, the quietest of all the lines that runs through Roanoke, Virginia, happened to be the one where I would film my first train moving through this city. Moving along the street and up the bridge, we can see the turn that this train is taking off the Y to hit the Winston-Salem district, and we can see a lot of the other tracks that run through downtown Roanoke, Virginia. Going back to the map, we've unlocked, per se, the Winston-Salem district, but the trackage that continues to the left of where 18W is going right now, that is the Blue Ridge district. Even more, ex-Norfolk and Western Railway trackage that runs in between Crewe, Virginia and Roanoke, Virginia. And in contrast to the Winston-Salem district, the Blue Ridge district actually does see a fair amount of traffic, as we'll eventually see soon. For now, it was empty though, and the only rails that were occupied in Roanoke before me was the leg of the Y leading to the Winston-Salem district. This is only my first day in Roanoke, but I'm already starting to get a taste of how much action runs through the city, because not even 5 minutes after this tail end cleared, I looked behind me to see headlights.
Hello there.
Headlights of some manifest that was coming out of one of the Roanoke yards and getting prepared to continue on the Blue Ridge district. As the light fades, we can see this manifest taking the tracks surrounding the former Norfolk Southern East End shops. As I mentioned before, these shops no longer belong to Norfolk Southern, and this property is now used by Genesis Rail, a contractor that does servicing for different locomotive equipment from what I've seen. Despite Genesis Rail having control over this property, the Norfolk Southern presence isn't completely vanished, because in some of the tracks that lie just outside the front end of the shops, you'll find some maintenance away equipment from Norfolk Southern.
What is that?
Norfolk Southern stores passenger cars and old caboose and other railway equipment that they use for their track maintenance and inspection. Something I thought I would be a part of when I first saw this rolling stock here, but that never actually happened. Anyways, it was getting late, fam and I needed rest, and I still had more apartment searching to do, so this would be the last of any rail fanning I did on this journey up to Roanoke before I would eventually return 2 months later for my start with Norfolk Southern. A thoroughbred making thoroughbred, you feel me? While the East End shops are located in basically downtown Roanoke, my actual work would reside on the outskirts of the west side of town. My work would be at the locomotive shops located at Schaefer's Crossing, which is next to the bigger of the 2 yards that is located in this area for Norfolk Southern. The bigger yard being North Yard. And this is the yard where really all the activity happens. And it was cool, actually getting to work on Norfolk Southern locomotives. It was fun. The little tunnel leading into the parking lot for the shops had an old Norfolk and Western logo on it.
Whoa.
And the Norfolk and Western Heritage Unit. Yo, this is genuinely insane. This is in my first week of working here. I get off work on my 3rd day, and I look down the parking lot and I see some blue, and I'm like, hey, yo. and it was just sitting there.
Nice.
For some reason, this unit was long hood forward solo on the front end of this train, which is more than likely because the full consist of this train had to drop off a locomotive at the shops here. So they had cut off the power that they needed to and left this unit sitting here by itself for my viewing pleasure, outside the parking lot of the shops, because there was no way I was gonna get caught filming this. No sir. Wow. Not even because of trouble, because I don't want to get bullied. The train that 8103 is on right now is Norfolk Southern 11Z, and the train that is passing it right now is Norfolk Southern 12Z. Both of these trains running on the Roanoke district. Even more ex-Norfolk and Western Railway trackage that, as suggested by its namesake, runs from Roanoke, Virginia up to Shenandoah, Virginia. And just like the Winston-Salem district, it is dead. Not as dead as the Winston-Salem, but it is bad. It's actually insane that I happened to catch 11Z and 12Z passing each other, because we are genuinely looking at half of all the mainline traffic that will run this line this day. The only other two mainline trains that you'll see are 16T and 15T, and if you're lucky you'll catch a local, but that barely runs up this line. Looking back at the map, we could see that the Roanoke district and the Blue Ridge district split off right around where the Y is at. And so after getting a few views of the Norfolk and Western Heritage unit, at least what I could from this spot, I continued to downtown Roanoke, Virginia, just by the East End shops, to see 12Z continuing up on its route. And boy oh boy, if I knew what I knew today about this line and the stuff it had, I absolutely would have chased this thing. This is definitely a train that was worth following, considering the line and the little goodies that it has, or at least had. Back next to the East End shops, we could see the same Norfolk Southern inspection equipment that I'd seen when I first came here, but there's now a new face at the East End shops. This is NIWX 8525, a General Electric B39-8E that was built in 1987 that now serves for the Northern Illinois and Wisconsin Railway. You know what's unique about that name? Nope. None of those locations are here. We are in Virginia. I have no idea what this thing is doing here and how it got here, but it was a very pleasant surprise seeing this. It's not every day that you see a standard cab GE-8 just randomly sitting outside of some shops. Evidently, it seemed that Genesis Rail was doing some sort of servicing on this locomotive, but as for the specifics, when it got here and when it was going to leave, I truly had no clue. Anyways, at this point, 12C was gone and there was no other activity on the East End shops, so I decided to go back to the original Y where I'd caught my first train in Roanoke. Stopping here because I had seen some approach aspect for the Y for something coming off the Winston-Salem district. So being curious, I decided to pull off to see what train this was, and within about 15 minutes, the gates activated for something approaching the Y from the Winston-Salem end. To my surprise, Amtrak came rounding the curve. This particular Amtrak train being Amtrak 66, which is part of the Northeast Regional Service offered by Amtrak. Now, don't get it confused, Amtrak does not run the Winston-Salem district. All the Amtrak trains that run through Roanoke, Virginia come in from the east on the Blue Ridge district, and depart going east in the same way that they came in. However, right where the Winston-Salem district begins, just down from the Y, is a little pull-off that Amtrak needs to store their trains off of the Norfolk Southern main line. So the way Amtrak runs in Roanoke is that they pull in from the east on the Blue Ridge district into the station, drop off all the passengers at the station, back up across the Y, take the leg of the Y that brings them to the Salem-Winston district, and consequently that storage track so that they have a place to store their trains that isn't on the Norfolk Southern main line. And then when the eastbound train is scheduled, they will reverse out of the storage track, up a little bit of the Salem-Winston trackage, and up through the Y and into the station, so that way the head end is already faced east for its departure from Roanoke. And so knowing that Amtrak would be departing soon and that they wouldn't be taking these tracks in front of me, I returned back to the East End shops, where after about 20 minutes, Amtrak 66 departed the station and began their eastbound exit out of Roanoke to continue running the Northeast Regional Service. With Amtrak gone, believe it or not, the only line that had trains running on it was the Winston-Salem district. With all these trains, you'd be thinking that this line was actually active. I would return from the East End shops, moving down the street just a little bit, to find yet another clear aspect heading towards the Y. As I mentioned before, if it's not 18W or 19W running this line, it's probably either a local or an as-needed bulk train. And fortunately for us today, it would happen to be the latter. As shortly after my arrival here, I heard a K5 LLA off in the distance, which was promptly followed up by this beat-up ace with a scuffed nose, leading some grain train into downtown Roanoke. I wanted to continue exploring the Winston-Salem district, and I found out that the road that I was on actually followed this tracks for a little bit. So the very next day, I would follow the street to find today's Amtrak 66 parked off in that storage track I had mentioned before. Amtrak today being stopped because there was actually a local on the Winston-Salem today that shortly came out of the tree line and slowly traversed towards downtown. And in pure Roanoke fashion, literally as I'm watching the head end of this local pass by, I start hearing an engine rumble behind me. What the heck happening? And quickly turn around to find this. Now, if you can't tell, this is not the Winston-Salem district that this power is running on. This power is coming out of the second of the 2 yards that Norfolk Southern uses in the Roanoke area, this yard being South Yard. South Yard is much smaller than North Yard, and it's really used more as a storage yard than it is a switching or building yard for trains. South Yard lies in between the Whitethorn district that runs in between Roanoke, Virginia and Nares, Virginia, and the Alta Vista district that runs in between Roanoke, Virginia and Abilene, Virginia. Both districts being ex-Virginia Railway trackage, and both districts carrying a lot of bulk traffic, especially coal. And Norfolk Southern uses South Yard as a holding place for bulk trains coming down the Whitethorn district to stop and tie down before they can get new crews that will eventually take these trains down the Alta Vista district towards different customers that may lie in Virginia or North Carolina. And the evidence of these rails formerly belonging to the Virginia Railway is shown clearly by the station that we're catching all these trains at right now. Right next to Norfolk Southern South Yard is the Virginia Railway Roanoke Passenger Station, which was built in 1910 and has now been converted as sort of a memorial to the Virginia Railway's historical presence in this area. And while the station may be dead, the rails that lie next to it definitely are not, as plenty of bulk trains, even in this day of dying coal traffic, continue to run through this line and cross over the Winston-Salem district that Amtrak and other Norfolk Southern traffic relies on. The power that we're seeing coming out of South Yard right now is moving towards the diamond where the Alta Vista and Winston-Salem districts cross over each other so that these units can switch tracks and back into one of the coal trains that has been left to park here at South Yard. And I would have loved to get a good view of how the Winston-Salem and Alta Vista districts cross each other, but there was a storm coming in, and I was not getting caught up in this, no sir. So nearly 2 months later, I would find myself on that road bridge that crosses the tracks, running over both the former Virginian and Norfolk and Western Railway trackage. Now looking at this bridge, you would think it's just some standard road bridge going over some tracks.
Yes.
But about 2 days prior, I happened to be on this bridge, and I discovered that this bridge was erected by not only the city of Roanoke, but also the Norfolk and Western Railway in 1927. Was definitely not expecting to see that. I'm guessing once roads started booming in Virginia, the Norfolk and Western helped the city build some sort of path that wouldn't interfere with their operations. And 97 years later, this bridge continues to stand, overlooking the former Virginian and Norfolk and Western railways that were alive during its inception. Anyways, besides that, that's not the reason I came out here on this day. I came up here to see 19W coming off of the Winston-Salem district as it prepares to enter downtown Roanoke, Virginia. Specifically choosing this spot because now we actually get a good view of how the Winston-Salem crosses over the Altavista. And in a very fitting fashion, as soon as the tail end of 19W cleared the diamond, I turned around across the bridge to see some bulk coal traffic getting ready to exit South Yard and hit the diamond to continue on the Altavista district. Shortly after this Alta Vista bulk move passed, today's Amtrak 66 would begin backing out of the storage track and near the switch to let the conductor hop off the tail end to throw the switch and line Amtrak onto the main line. We won't waste our time looking at this move though, and instead we'll continue further on to the Alta Vista district at one of the most scenic spots that lies just outside of downtown Roanoke. I am currently standing on a bridge that is part of the Blue Ridge Parkway that lies right next to the Roanoke River outlook. The bridge, as you could guess, is running over the Roanoke River, and the Alta Vista line happens to run parallel to the river for some time. Now, as I mentioned, the Alta Vista district connects directly to South Yard, but bulk traffic is not the only traffic that runs this line, so plenty of intermodal and manifest traffic actually has a connection to the Blue Ridge district to completely bypass South Yard and take the trackage that goes by North Yard. And on this day, when I happened to be out here looking for some trains, I would happen to find two westbounds carrying completely different traffic heading towards downtown Roanoke. The first one being some sort of gravel or hopper train. Once this train passed, I would continue down the bridge a little bit to be steering directly over the tracks, to probably see a manifest rolling by not even 15 minutes later. And continuing my exploration of the railroads that lie around Virginia, I would return back to the Salem-Winston district, but not near downtown Roanoke.
What is this?
Currently, we are at CP Starkey, which is one of the first control points that lies outside of downtown, and is where you start getting into some of the really scenic parts of this line. I hadn't done enough exploration of this line to know all of the good spots. I really just stopped here because there was a crossing, there was parking, and the shot looked decent. And today, on yet another post-work afternoon, I would come here after seeing some clearance for this line's most reliable train to me, Norfolk Southern 19W coming into downtown Roanoke. I've mentioned the Blue Ridge District a few times, but up until this point, we haven't actually explored any parts of the Blue Ridge District outside of Roanoke, Virginia. So 3 hours after capturing 19W, I would return back to the rails and find myself next to this hidden bridge on the Blue Ridge line. A bridge that has been here since 1919, and that has also been the victim of some local fun in the meantime. As I aforementioned, Amtrak runs these rails, but as I also said before, there is a lot of traffic that runs this line. This line sees plenty of manifest, coal, and intermodal service. A significant portion of all the intermodal traffic that will pass by downtown Roanoke comes off of this line, and today would be no exception, as the one train that I would happen to catch on this outing will be a westbound intermodal train carrying international traffic. I believe this train being Norfolk Southern 274 for Enola, Pennsylvania. From here, I would try to test my luck with the Roanoke district, and luck was surely not on my side, because just as I was coming up to the spot that I was looking to stop at, the gates were already coming down from Norfolk Southern 11Z heading towards Roanoke Yard. And being at the spot and seeing that the road would follow the tracks for a little bit, I decided to do a chase. At this point, I'm gonna keep it a bean. I had no idea where I was going. I just knew that the road followed the tracks and I was dead gonna stop at the first crossing I could find. With 11Z gone, I decided to return back to the original spot that I was intending to go to come across this very nice surprise.
What?
Center position lights. A true hallmark of the old Norfolk and Western that used to run these rails. Having a very unique light design that actually surrounds the exterior of a circular base instead of the vertical style that's standard on most railroads today. These signals can be found at CP Cloverdale in Cloverdale, Virginia on the Roanoke district. These signals, as you can tell, are very old. But with this line being an older Norfolk and Western one and not having too much traffic, you can actually find plenty of them.
Nice.
All I can say is though, catch them while you can. In the meantime though, that clearance we saw on the signals was for 11Z's counterpart, Norfolk Southern 12Z. So I was chilling at this crossing, with good evening light, intending to see 12Z come by, before the sun got blocked by a mountain.
Are you serious right now?
Yeah. Getting finessed by a tall mound of dirt is wicked work, bro. And this unfortunately left me with nothing but shadows by the time that 12Z arrived. If you go back to the map, you can see that we've basically covered all the lines that run in and out of Roanoke, Virginia, but there is still one line that we have yet to touch. And so 2 days after my visit to CP Cloverdale, I would find myself about 30 minutes outside of Roanoke, Virginia at this secluded spot.
Sensational.
We are currently staring at two railroad bridges that are both owned by Norfolk Southern. The one sort of hidden by the trees is the quieter Whitethorn district that feeds into South Yard, and the one closer to us is the busy Norfolk Southern Christiansburg district. Yet again, more ex-Norfolk and Western Railway trackage that runs in between Roanoke, Virginia and Bluefield, West Virginia. Almost every single train that goes west out of Roanoke or comes in from the east towards Roanoke takes the Christiansburg district. It is a very active line that sees all the westbound intermodal traffic, plenty of coal trains, and also lots of manifests. Both of these lines run parallel per se, running west out of Roanoke and towards their respective destinations, and they continue to run parallel as they cross over the Roanoke River here. However, if you look closely at my map, you could see that these two lines do actually cross each other. And referring to Google Maps, we can see that this crossover happens very close to where I'm currently standing at right now on this bridge. The crossover occurring via yet another bridge on the Whitethorn district crossing over the Christiansburg district. However, unfortunately, this bridge is very secluded by some woods, and although I could have done some risky maneuvers to try to walk down there, I didn't know enough about this area to even try to attempt that. So for now, I was just here waiting for traffic, hoping for something to be running on both lines. And unfortunately, there was something running on both lines, and I say unfortunately because I was less than 1 minute away from these two trains passing by each other simultaneously over these two bridges in front of me.
One shot at that.
The first train that we would see here would be coming off of the Whitethorn district, being Norfolk Southern S20, an extra as-needed run of Norfolk Southern 820, which carries coal loads from Weller, Virginia to Norfolk, Virginia. Shortly coming after my arrival here and having quite the announcement of its arrival through this area, running through the mountains here. not even 10 seconds after the tail end of S20 cleared, I heard the distant sound of a westbound intermodal that shortly came racing by. Well, my squad, and that is my introduction to all of the lines that run into and out of Roanoke, Virginia. This video was long, but let's be real, I was up in this area for over 2 months. I filmed plenty more than what appeared inside this video. And I'll slowly, and I definitely mean slowly, be trudging through all the footage that's in my backlog. Until then, my squad, I hope that you guys enjoyed voyaging the Virginia rails as much as I did. I hope that you guys are ready for the hours of footage that I got while I was up here. And until next time, my friends, God bless. I will see you soon out on the high iron.